Most men don't realize this until much later in life. But the moment a man stops chasing a woman, everything changes. Not just a little, dramatically. Her attitude shifts, her tone sharpens, her certainty turns into confusion, and sometimes even anger. And the question is simple: why? Why does a woman react so strongly when a man finally stops doing the chasing she once expected, demanded, and perhaps even took for granted? Today, we're going to break down the psychology behind this reaction in a way that's calm, grounded, and deeply eye-opening. And by the end of this video, men of every age, especially those in their 50s, 60s, and beyond, will understand something that younger men often don't learn until it's too late. Because once you understand the truth behind why a woman reacts the way she does, you stop personalizing it. You stop blaming yourself. You stop thinking something is wrong with you. Instead, you begin to see the emotional patterns not as attacks, but as reactions to something much deeper happening beneath the surface. Men who chase tend to be men who care, men who invest time, energy, attention, and heart into showing a woman that she matters. But over time, something interesting happens when a man gives too much of himself without balance. The affection starts to feel one-sided, the effort becomes predictable, and the man's attention starts being treated not as a gift, but as a guarantee. The woman assumes it will always be there. This is a common theme found in psychology research and countless relationship studies. Human beings, men and women alike, tend to undervalue what comes too easily and overvalue what feels scarce. And this is where the dynamic begins to shift. When a man is always available, always pursuing, always trying to prove himself, she may appreciate it in the beginning, but eventually the excitement fades. Not because she is a bad person, but because the human brain adapts quickly. The predictable becomes invisible. The constant becomes background noise. And here's the part many men don't realize. When the attention becomes expected, a woman stops seeing it as affection. She sees it as obligation. It no longer feels romantic. It feels routine. And naturally, she emotionally detaches a little at a time. But that detachment is quiet. It's subtle. It's soft. Men don't usually see it happening. She still replies, still talks, still interacts. But her energy is different. She's present physically, but distant emotionally. And most men sense something is off, but don't know how to respond. So what do? They chase even harder. They call more. They text more. They try harder. They worry more. They try to fix the imbalance by giving more of what was already being undervalued. But then something unexpected happens. The man finally reaches a point of clarity. Maybe he feels tired. Maybe the lack of appreciation becomes too obvious. Maybe he simply wakes up one morning and realizes he's giving far more than he's receiving. And so quietly, calmly, without anger or drama, he begins to pull back. Not as a strategy, not as a tactic, but as self-respect returning to the surface. He stops chasing. He stops pushing. He stops begging for attention, affection, or validation. He stops trying to force something that doesn't feel mutual anymore. And this moment right here, is where the entire dynamic flips. Because the sudden absence of the man's attention is the emotional equivalent of a loud alarm inside her mind. Attention she once expected is suddenly gone. The consistency she relied on is gone. The good morning messages stop. The extra effort stops. The checking in stops. And this absence creates something powerful: contrast. In psychology, contrast is one of the strongest emotional triggers. When you experience something for a long period of time and then it disappears, the emotional impact is enormous. And that is why many women respond with frustration, confusion, or even anger when a man stops chasing. She's not reacting to the man. She's reacting to the sudden change in emotional contrast. When something becomes scarce again, its value skyrockets. And for the first time in a long time, she begins to feel what the man was feeling all along: uncertainty. She wonders where he went. She wonders what happened. She wonders why he stopped. She wonders if someone else is now receiving his attention. And beneath all of those thoughts is something deeper, a sense of lost control. You see, for many women in modern dating, being chased is not just romantic, it's affirming. It makes her feel wanted. It reassures her. It comforts her insecurities. So when a man stops chasing, she loses that emotional comfort. She loses that psychological cushion, and the reaction can be intense. Sometimes she becomes distant. Sometimes she becomes confrontational. Sometimes she becomes emotional. But no matter how it shows, it all comes from the same root source, the shift from certainty to uncertainty. Now, it's important to say this clearly. Not all women respond this way. Not all modern women have these patterns. But the pattern is common enough and consistent enough that countless relationship therapists, psychologists, and even marriage counselors have documented it in both modern research and decades of real-life cases. What men often misinterpret as drama is often fear. What looks like anger is often anxiety. What comes across as irritation is often vulnerability. Women, like men, build emotional habits. And when a habit is broken, emotions rise. Many men watching this have been in relationships where they gave everything, effortlessly, assuming it would build deeper connection. But over time, they found their efforts were not appreciated, not reciprocated, and not valued. And that's when they reached the point of exhaustion. A man can love deeply, but when his love feels like a burden instead of a blessing, he naturally withdraws. He doesn't yell. He doesn't argue. He doesn't accuse. He simply steps back because peace feels better than pressure. And here's the part many men don't know. Women often notice the shift immediately. She might not say it at first, but she feels it. The energy changes. The dynamic changes. She starts thinking more. She becomes more aware of his distance. And this is where the emotional explosion often happens. She may blame him. She may accuse him of changing. She may suddenly put in effort she never gave before. She may test him. She may guilt trip him. She may try to pull him back into the old dynamic where he was doing most of the work. But at this stage in life, especially for men 50 and older, most are simply done with games. They've lived enough, loved enough, lost enough, and sacrificed enough to recognize when a relationship requires more effort than it gives in return. As Dr. Henry Cloud, one of the most respected psychologists in the field of relationships, says, when you have to convince someone of your value, you've already lost yourself. And that's what so many older men realize. They rediscover themselves when they stop chasing. And we can pause right here to highlight a powerful truth. The moment a man stops chasing is not about punishing a woman. It's about returning to balance. It's about restoring dignity. It's about giving both people space to see whether the connection was real or one-sided. And you'd be surprised how often a woman's explosion is simply a reaction to the shock of losing a source of emotional consistency she didn't appreciate until it disappeared. When a man finally stops chasing a woman who has grown accustomed to endless attention, something fascinating happens inside her mind. And it's something most men never truly understand until much later in life. At first, she believes the silence simply means he's busy or distracted, almost like she expects the world to circle back around her again. But when the silence continues, when his energy no longer returns to her, when he no longer jumps to reply, solve problems, or provide emotional validation, a deep discomfort begins to rise within her. Psychologists often describe this moment as a mirror of self-worth, a moment where she must confront who she is without the external praise she once relied on. For modern women who grew up in an era of constant digital approval, that sudden absence of male pursuit triggers a sense of vulnerability they rarely admit publicly, but feel intensely in private. As days pass, her confidence slowly shifts from certainty to confusion. She begins replaying old conversations in her head, looking for clues, trying to figure out what changed. Modern dating culture has created a dynamic where many women assume men will always pursue regardless of how they behave. So when a man shows self-respect and stops chasing, it disrupts the pattern entirely. The silence suddenly becomes louder than any argument could ever be. Instead of him asking what's wrong, instead of him trying harder, instead of him extending the emotional lifeline she's used to receiving, he chooses peace, and that choice alone often shakes her more than anything he could have said. Experts like Dr. Carl Jung explained that humans fear introspection more than rejection, And this is exactly why the sudden absence of male attention feels like a confrontation she never prepared for. At this stage, her emotions often shift into what many relationship experts call reactive attachment. She wants the attention back, not because she truly wants the man, but because she's uncomfortable without the emotional supply his pursuit gave her. It's not love. It's validation hunger. And this is where many men get confused, especially men in their 50s, 60s, and 70s who grew up in a different era, when communication was more direct and less dependent on emotional games. They mistake this sudden reinterest as a sign she cares, when in reality, she just misses the feeling of being pursued. She misses the ego boost. She misses the convenience. She misses the emotional security that came from being wanted, not the man himself. That distinction is something many men only learn through painful experience later in life, when the silence stretches long enough and she realizes he truly stepped back. A shift occurs inside her that many men never expect. The modern woman, who may once have appeared confident, independent, and fully in control, now starts to feel a loss of power. Not necessarily over him, though that's part of it, but over the dynamic she believed she controlled effortlessly. In today's dating world, attention has become a currency, and when a man withdraws his, it's like removing funding from a fragile emotional economy. She can no longer rely on him to soothe moments of loneliness, boredom, or insecurity. She can no longer count on him to respond quickly or shape his actions around her needs. For the first time, she experiences what he felt when he was the only one investing, the only one trying, the only one emotionally exposed. Some women respond to this loss of control by panicking quietly, trying to regain the dynamic through subtle messages, passive comments, or sudden friendliness. Others react more dramatically, attempting to guilt him, question him, or accuse him of being inconsistent, even though they were the ones who left his efforts unreciprocated for months. In many ways, this reaction reveals a truth men often learn far too late. Pursuit hides the reality of a relationship. When a man is constantly the giver, the initiator, the planner, the one trying to hold things together, he cannot see clearly whether the woman truly values him or simply enjoys what he provides. When he stops chasing, the truth reveals itself quickly and without mercy. Interestingly, experts like Dr. John Gray, author of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, have spoken about how women tend to seek emotional reassurance, while men tend to seek peace and clarity. Modern dating, however, has reversed this dynamic for many women. They seek reassurance not from genuine connection, but from the ego boost of being desired. And men, exhausted from years or even decades of chasing relationships that didn't value them, now choose peace by stepping back. This is why so many modern women lose it when a man finally stops chasing. They misunderstand his silence as rejection, when in reality it is self-preservation. He is not running away, he is protecting his heart. As the internal discomfort grows, she may even start rewriting the story in her mind, convincing herself he changed, he became distant, he became cold, or he became uninterested, even though none of that is true. What actually happened is that he realized his worth. He realized effort should be mutual. He realized his time is valuable. Many older men especially reach this point later in life, often after divorce or after years of giving far more than they received. They finally understand something they wish they had known decades earlier. The person who genuinely cares will meet them in the middle, not demand the chase, not require constant proving, not disappear until she wants something. But modern dating has often conditioned women to believe men exist to provide endless pursuit, and when that pattern breaks, it leaves them emotionally unprepared. One of the most powerful things about a man stepping back is that it reveals compatibility instantly. A woman who is genuinely interested will step forward. She will communicate, she will reciprocate, she will show effort. But a woman who is only enjoying the attention will fall silent, confused, or angry. This simple shift finally exposes what was hidden beneath the surface. Men in their later years often speak about how freeing this realization is, how they finally feel clarity after decades of emotional fog. When the chase ends, the truth begins. The woman who cared will show it. The woman who didn't will disappear. And this, more than anything, is why modern women react so strongly. The moment he stops chasing, the illusion shatters. Eventually, she must face the final stage, accepting that the dynamic has changed and that she no longer holds the emotional leverage she once did. This is where growth can happen for both people, if they are mature enough to understand it. She may start to reflect on her own contribution or lack of effort. She may begin questioning why she relied so heavily on external validation. She may even realize she missed a good man, not because he chased, but because he cared. And the man, instead of losing himself in pursuit, learns to value mutual effort and emotional balance. He learns to stop giving more than he receives. He learns to recognize genuine interest over temporary excitement. When a man stops chasing, he is not rejecting her, he is simply returning home to himself. He is choosing emotional balance, mental peace, and self-respect. And modern women who relied on the chase for validation often struggle to accept that reality. But the beauty of this truth is that it opens the door to healthier connections, ones built on mutual appreciation instead of imbalance. The man becomes stronger, wiser, and more grounded, and the woman who truly aligns with him will show it without needing to be chased. In the end, the silence that felt so uncomfortable becomes the very thing that reveals the truth neither of them could see when the chasing never stopped. This is why the shift is so powerful. It exposes intentions, clarifies emotions, and allows both people to grow into relationships that are built on shared effort, not one-sided pursuit.